Let's get this out of the way. Mars Attacks is a movie where Tom Jones fights aliens, Jack Black gets obliterated in his first major studio role, and humanity is saved by a yodeling grandma. And no folks, that's not a fever dream. That's just the plot. But how did this bizarre alien invasion comedy become one of the weirdest, most divisive blockbusters of the 1990s? Why was it stacked with A-list celebs, most of whom get vaporized in hilarious ways?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, Natalie. I just don't know what's going on anymore.
And did you know it was inspired by a series of violent, pulpy trading cards from the 60s? Cards so graphic that they were pulled off of shelves. Well, if you didn't, or just want to relive the glory days of the 90s, then sit back and strap in as we dive in to what the happened to Tim Burton's Mars Attacks.
I'm not gonna have that thing in my house.
We may have to. The people expect me to meet with them.
Well, they're not gonna eat off the Van Buren China.
Before the CGI Martians melted Congress with their ray guns and screeching, they were cardboard illustrations. Mars Attacks began life in 1962 as a trading card series, cooked up by artist Wally Wood and painted by the legendary Norman Saunders. The cards told a sequential sci-fi story across 55 hand-painted panels, and they were gnarly. Melting flesh, skeleton soldiers, dogs on fire. This was not your average baseball card pack. The controversy was immediate. Parents freaked out, PTA groups assembled, and Topps pulled the line before it finished a full run. But decades later, those same gory cards would find a second life, thanks to a man who had a thing for the macabre, Tim Burton.
Whoa, he made the international sign of the donut.
The Mars Attacks trading cards had quietly developed a cult following throughout the 80s, and by the early 90s, Topps began licensing them for reprints and collectibles. British screenwriter Jonathan Gems, known for working with Tim Burton on Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, pitched a Mars Attacks film to Burton in the early 90s.
Didn't we say all we needed to say with the first Beetlejuice? Must we go tropical?
Burton, already a fan of kitschy B-movie horror and sci-fi, seemed interested. Gems's pitch wasn't to make a serious alien invasion film a la War of the Worlds or Independence Day, which was in development around the same time. Instead, he proposed a chaotic, darkly comedic ensemble piece that paid homage to the 1950s alien invasion movies, with modern effects and a satirical twist. After hearing the pitch, Tim latched onto the idea. After all, this was a guy whose brain already looked like a Martian in diagram form. Warner Brothers greenlit the project, hoping that Burton could deliver another Batman-sized hit. But there was just one small problem. Nobody could figure out what tone this movie was supposed to have. Was it a satire, a comedy, a kids movie where a chihuahua gets fused to Sarah Jessica Parker's body? Burton's answer to all? Yes.
I had something of a schoolboy crush on you for, ages.
Warner Brothers, riding high off Burton's box office clout with Batman, Batman Returns, gave the project the go-ahead in 1993, even before Ed Wood had began production. The film would be Burton's first major project under his own production banner, and a passion project to boot. But even Burton admitted, no one quite knew what the tone was supposed to have, even him. Early drafts of the script featured over 60 major characters, modeled after disaster movies like The Towering Inferno and The Poseidon Adventure. The idea was to cast dozens of stars, and kill most of them in increasingly absurd ways. Burton gave Gems and the other screenwriters, including Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski at one point, a free hand to go wild. And go wild they did. The idea was to make it like a disaster movie, a genre that audiences understood. Big cast, big destruction, bigger consequences. Only this time, the consequences were Jack Nicholson playing two roles, both of whom died horribly. The studio was banking on big names, and it worked. In terms of drawing attention at least, Burton assembled an eye-popping cast. Jack Nicholson initially signed on to play the president, but Burton wanted him to do double duty as two characters. Nicholson agreed, ultimately playing President James Dale and Vegas hustler Art Land. According to Burton, it was partly to save on budget, and partly because it felt right for a film where chaos ruled.
I want the people to know that they still have 2 out of 3 branches of the government working for them, and that ain't bad.
Jack Black, then a rising actor from TV and acting in a few films, was cast as a patriotic, dim-witted soldier, a comic relief role that ends in an instant Martian death beam, and is actually one of the highlights of the film, albeit depressing as hell. Lisa Marie, Burton's then-fiancée, played the Martian girl, a silent seductress in a skin-tight outfit and a giant wig. Her performance was done mostly in mime and physical acting, and that wig would even cause a permanent scar on the top of her head. Ouch. At the end of the film, and yes, we're jumping into spoiler territory, does anyone find it funny that Natalie Portman is appointed the leader of the free world after the Martian attack? Was this what made George Lucas cast her as Queen Amidala for the Star Wars prequels? Who's to say? Did we mention that Tom Jones plays himself and ends up being one of the heroes of the movie? Oh, you're saying we did mention it? Well, too bad. It's Tom freaking Jones. Burton originally wanted to use stop motion for the Martians, a loving homage to Ray Harryhausen. But Warner Brothers panicked when they saw the cost estimates. Computer-generated imagery was just ultimately cheaper at the time, even in '96. So ILM stepped in and created those bug-eyed, skeletal little creeps that we know today. This decision saved time and money, but arguably robbed the film of the charming, handmade vibe that Burton was initially chasing. Still, the Martian's movements, rubbery, jerky, and just off enough, remain delightfully unsettling. Principal photography for the film kicked off in August 1996, with most shooting done in California sound stages, and additional location filming in Las Vegas and New Mexico. The setting was meant to evoke an atomic age Americana vibe. Production design by Wynne Thomas leaned heavily into bright colors, retro architecture, and toy-like environments. Burton treated the movie like a live-action cartoon. Colorful sets, surreal lighting, as well as the over-the-top performances. There was a surreal sense of freedom on set, but also disorganization. Film script was constantly being rewritten, with entire subplots dropped mid-shoot. Characters were rewritten or zapped entirely. There were so many celebrity deaths that Burton made sure no actor knew for sure if they'd make it to the end. Spoiler, most of them didn't. Speaking of over the top, Burton encouraged the actors to push their performances to the edge. Martin Short's lecherous White House press secretary bordered on Looney Tunes level, while Sarah Jessica Parker's performance was split between her normal head and a chihuahua's body, required separate green screen sessions, and complex visual compositing. Pierce Brosnan, after wrapping his first outing as James Bond in GoldenEye, played a disembodied floating head and fell in love with Parker's dog-lady hybrid. Danny DeVito, in a glorified cameo, wanted to ham it up as much as possible, offering to ad-lib and improvise lines. Too bad his character wasn't in it for longer. Fun fact, the Martian's screeching completely made up in post. The script just labeled it as Martian gibberish, and Burton figured it out later. Sometimes chaos is the plan. Filming wrapped in late 1996, just weeks before the movie's December release. While ILM handled the Martians and Danny Elfman provided a theremin-laced score, post-production turned into a race to blend Burton's retro flair with modern, for the time, effects. Editing was chaotic, with several sequences trimmed for runtime, and some characters, as mentioned before, were completely removed from the final cut. The CG Martians were an uphill battle. The animators struggled with their translucent skulls and bony hands, but the end result is still delightfully grotesque. Elfman, fresh off of a brief falling out with Burton during The Nightmare Before Christmas, returned to score the film, and he nailed it. The Mars Attacks score is pure atomic age madness, channeling B-movie horror and sci-fi with horns, clanging percussion, and lots of theremin weirdness. And yes, the movie ends with yodeling, because if you're going to make a satire about Earth's destruction, why not have Slim Whitman save the day?
Richie, I think these guys are very sick.
Mars Attacks released in theaters on December 13th, 1996. Its biggest problem upon release was who opened up against it, a little film called Jerry Maguire. Ever heard of it? It also faced another problem.
Today, we celebrate our
Independence Day, which had just released over the summer, it was the blockbuster film of the year and would go on to be the highest-grossing movie of 1996. That film was patriotic, bombastic, and triumphant. Mars Attacks was the opposite, gleefully nihilistic, chaotic, and bizarrely mean-spirited. And not everyone was in on the joke, or maybe they just didn't like Jack Nicholson in dual roles. Critics were split. Some praised the visuals and audacity, while others thought that it was a mess with no emotional core. Audiences were equally baffled. To this day, it's one of the few movies my parents still call atrocious.
They don't know what the hell they're talking about. Liberals, intellectuals, peacemongers, idiots!
Despite a $100 million budget and all that star power, Mars Attacks only made about $37 million domestically. It did better internationally, but it wasn't the hit that Warner Brothers had hoped for.
I think they've come to save us.
Despite all of this, Warner Brothers went all in on merch. They had some of the weirdest, most wonderful pieces of merchandise, and it perfectly captured the chaotic, grotesque energy of the movie itself. Produced by Trendmasters, the toy company behind many cult favorite 90s lines, the figures were a bizarre blend of cartoonish design and graphic alien carnage. The line featured highly detailed Martian soldiers with their signature exposed brains, gleeful grins, and bulging eyes. There was also a line of talking figures and even vehicles, like the Martian saucer, which yours truly owned. Perhaps because the film's tone confused audiences, and it wasn't a massive box office smash, the toys didn't exactly fly off the shelves. Over the years, though, they've gained a cult following and have become cherished collector's items for fans who appreciate Mars Attacks' bonkers brand of sci-fi satire. There were action figures, comic books, shirts, and there's even a video game releasing soon. Trendmasters released a full toy line, including ray guns and Martian leaders, which today fetch a decent price on eBay if you didn't rip the packaging off as a kid.
Can this be the end of life as we know it? Mars Attacks from Trendmasters. Vehicles and action figures each sold separately.
Back in the day, this was a true staple of the VHS and early DVD era. You'd easily find it tucked between Men in Black and Independence Day at your local Blockbuster, practically daring you to rent it. Its chaotic tone, all-star cast, and over-the-top alien mayhem made it a go-to movie for kids who wanted something just a little bit offbeat. For a generation, Mars Attacks wasn't just a movie, it was a rite of passage through the wonderfully weird corners of 90s home media.
Do that for?
Maybe they don't like the human being.
So what the happened to Mars Attacks? Well, it crashed and burned, then climbed out of the wreckage to become a VHS-era staple, a Hot Topic icon, and a fan favorite for weirdos everywhere. It didn't save the world, it didn't win any awards, but like a Martian in a giant robot suit, it stomped into pop culture and refused to leave. And if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint echo every time a studio greenlights a bold new reboot, and that, my friends, is what the happened to Mars Attacks.
On behalf of the people of Earth, well,
You did that well.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.